Hi, I'm David A. Ramos, Senior Manager of Coaching Education and Performance Analytics, and you're listening to Compete Like a Champion.
Welcome to Compete Like a Champion. You're here with Dr. Larry Lauer, mental skills specialist, and Coach Johnny Parks with USTA Player Development. Today, we've got a special guest on, Dr. Peter Scales. Dr. Peter Scales, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks, Johnny. Glad to be here.
I'm really excited. I mean, Larry sent this thought through about getting you on the podcast, and I started looking up, a little bit about what you do and the book that we'll be talking about here shortly. But I got really excited when I started reading about you as a person and what you do and what you've done. And I just wanted to give a little bit of premise in, then I'll hand it over to you to maybe give us some insights into your background. But, one of the big things that struck out to me was, for more than 45 years, you've been a leader in developmental psychology, researcher and author, a speaker, internationally recognized as one of the world's foremost authorities on positive development for youth and children. And, that's a huge area in what I do as a coach, and obviously Larry and his team with the mental skill side. And so just really excited to get you on. But thank you again for joining, and maybe hand it over to you to give us a little background about yourself.
Yeah, well, sure. I've survived all these years. That's 45 years of positive youth development, and I've been a researcher and an author, and I've run a family counseling center in Alaska and advised policymakers and so forth. So I've had a lot of different perspectives on positive youth development. And I became, a coach kind of the long way around. I mean, most tennis pros really got into tennis early. I got in at age 42. And my wife, Martha, was my first teacher. And I was already obviously a grown man, a psychologist, PhD psychologist. And I was kind of shocked at how, as much as I loved the game of tennis right away, tennis didn't bring out the best person in me, right? It brought out kind of the jerk in me. And so it was fascinating to me as a psychologist, and really embarrassing as a grown man of 42, my best John McEnroe at the time. And it got to the point where one of my pros at that time, who thankfully is still a good friend, said, Peter, you're just not good enough to be that angry. And it kind of got me onto the right track. Beginning of the right track, win so much. I wanted to win so much that every lost point, every lost game match was just this tragedy for me. And so I became really fascinated, not just with all levels of, the tennis game, the technical and the physical and everything else, but the mental, between my background and what tennis was seemingly doing to me. And I realized I had to get control over the things that I could control in order to really enjoy it, and in order to, continue to play with people like my wife who weren't going to play with me anymore. So it began a long kind of trek to becoming a calmer player. And then when I had the chance to start coaching, I really wanted to emphasize the mental and emotional side of things. That was in my wheelhouse. And I'd also come through the personal, experience of it. I didn't have the personal experience of being a junior champ or a collegiate champ to give to my tennis kids, but I did have the experience of being very emotionally distraught on the court, and how I tried to overcome that, tried to deal with that. So I really emphasized that right from the get-go. And eventually it led to the book, which was just after 12. But that's kind of a long way of how the book got to happen. Yeah.
Awesome. So Larry, talk to me a little bit about what drew you to getting Dr. Peter on.
Well, I think, Dr. Peter has a great sort of perspective on, the developmental psychology and understanding what how beings are growing and how the sport might impact them and that growth. And then also being a coach and sort of seeing it from that lens. And I'm just really curious, Peter, why tennis? Was it because your wife was playing tennis or teaching tennis? Like what brought you to tennis? Why wasn't it another sport? What was it about tennis?
Well, I'd like to say that I always had an affinity for tennis, but I was a basketball guy. And I was still trying in my late 30s and 40s to play full court ball with guys in their 20s. And my doctors told me I can't do that anymore. So I was open to something. I was open to something different. And when my wife and I got together, she was playing tennis and amassing trophies, and just it looked like a lot of fun. I had played a lot of table tennis when I was a kid. My father was a table tennis champ in New Jersey, so I had some of the the background of that kind of movement and the racket skills and that kind of thing. And I just fell in love with it immediately, everything about it, to the point where I was grinning a lot. And when I was grinning, at first, my wife thought I was being arrogant about, I'm just so good, this is, you can't touch me. Then she thought I was maybe just kind of squinting into the sun. But it was actually, I was just loving being out there, and it was great. I lost that eventually as I started competing. And that's when I got to being kind of out of control on the court. But my initial, which I think is a really important piece of what I try and do, and I know it's some of the things that you do, is to try and get players to remember and reimagine, re-experience why they fell in love with the sport in the first place. Because they get to a point where it becomes so important to execute and so important to perform that they've lost the idea that they had initially, which is, I fell in love with this thing because it was fun on so many levels and challenging, and I liked the challenge. And now I'm turning the challenges into a threat, and that's causing problems. So I'm trying to, in a lot of ways, I think, depersonalize the win-loss meaning of it and recapture for a lot of players the meaning that they had when they initially fell in love with it, and that's a lot of what I'm trying to do.
So from there, Peter, you start coaching, and I imagine your training in developmental psychology must have helped you quite a bit. How have you applied your training in education and psychology to the athletes, the tennis players that you've worked with?
Yeah, it's been a real positive, and my specialty has been adolescents and young adults, high school, middle school, college age. So professionally, I've specialized in that developmental range, and those are the young people I work with. So it's been a nice fit. I think that, one of the things I try and teach our players is where fear comes from. And so we talk a little bit about self-determination theory in psychology, the theory of human motivation. And it's real simple, and they get it. But it's also something that I've focused on in trying to organize and the way I relate to young people. And that is the ABCs, right? We're driven, our motivation is driven by our needs for autonomy, belonging, and competence. So, autonomy, we all want to feel like we have control over things. Belonging, are we loved? Are we lovable? Do we have connections? Good relationships. And competence, are we good at least one thing, and hopefully several things that we value and that society values? So pretty much everything comes down to the ABCs. And when we feel threatened, it's something wrong with those one or more of those ABCs. And if we as coaches, as pros, can be reinforcing those ABCs as much as possible with our players through tennis and through hopefully helping them understand how to take some of what we're teaching them on the court and apply it in their off-court lives too, then we're producing well-rounded people. And it's not just improving players, it's improving them as human beings. So it all gets wrapped up in what can I do to give them choice and voice and make them feel connected and loved and belonging, and obviously enhance their skills so that they feel growing competence.
Is it safe to say then, Peter, that you're creating a safe environment psychologically so they can then explore how good they can be, how they can excel in the sport, but you're creating that safety with the belonging, with having choices, with feeling like you're getting better or that you can play this game?
Yeah, I mean, that's another way of putting it. I really focus on the way we do it with those ABCs. It's physically and emotionally and psychologically got to be a safe place where respect is the bottom line, respect for ourselves, for teammates, coaches, officials, opponents, everybody. And it builds from there. The safe place. And I have to say, within that safe space, as we build a relationship with our players, then it becomes important, as you well know and have written about, to introduce levels of stress to them that is controlled stress, but that's part of their learning to deal with adversity on the court and off the court. But you can't do that if you haven't built a safe relationship, right? So you don't start day one with a new player or a new team and start doing adversity training with them before you've built up trust and safety. So yeah, that's the bottom line. That comes first.
And I really like how you put that together there, Peter. And obviously, honor. What the word that came to mind as you were saying that was honor, and honor seems to be really at the essence of your philosophy. Is obviously part of your philosophy when you talk about compete, learn, and honor, which we'll dive a little bit deeper into here shortly. But maybe just touch on honor a little bit deeper and how we can demonstrate honor in the sport of tennis.
Yeah, you're right. I phrase it as compete, learn, and honor. I came up with that motto years ago because we're training, our players to compete after all. But I try and teach them in reverse order of importance: honor, learn, and compete. The way Jose Higueras has talked about, it's the eyes first, then the feet, then the hands. Right? We see the hands as the last thing that connects the racket to the ball, but it starts with the eyes. And so for me, honor is the eyes. It's what grounds everything. It's the GPS, and it's at two levels. It's at a level of loving the game more than how you perform. Okay, the game is more important than you are, and when you're throwing your racket, or you're cursing, or you're being angry at your doubles partner for blowing an easy shot as if you never do, those things are not honorable. They're not putting the game first. They're not caring about other people ahead of you. It's all ego-centered. So it really is about trying to teach players. It's beyond what the code is. It's beyond what's said in front of the court. You have to put your opponent and the game before your needs. And when you do that, and I talk about, players like Tim Smyczek years ago gave Rafa a first serve at 6-5 in the fifth set in the French Open on the verge of possibly upsetting the greatest clay courter of all time and one of the best of all time. And he gave him a first serve, honorably, instead of allowing him to hit a second serve, which he could have done. And Rafa acknowledged, a lot of people will do stuff like that early in the match, but at 6-5 in the fifth, that takes character. That's honorable. And of course, Smitek lost, and Rafa went on to win one of his 90,000 Roland Garroses. But, the point is made, and we obviously can contrast that with players today who don't behave in an honorable way. So it just starts. Everything starts with that. If you don't have that, and a big piece of the honor is being humble, that it's not about you, your ego. You're not the center of the tennis universe. Tennis is the center of the tennis universe, right? And if you're non-ego involved about it and humble, then you're in a position where you can learn. Then you can learn. And if you can learn, then you can compete at the highest level at which you're capable of competing.
That's awesome, Peter. And it reminds me very similarly what we always say. I mean, we try to be a person first based philosophy, person first approach, which is always putting the interests of the athlete, the person in mind. And it really seems like taking this approach with the honor is not only teaching them about how to, I guess, honor our sport and its history and its culture on deeper levels, but then using that as to educate how we use that to honor ourselves. I mean, we know this is driven back years, and it's a sport that in the past required class and grace, and as you mentioned a little bit about honor in striving for gracefulness and balance and patience and clarity. But it seems like you've got a really good blend there of yes, honor is the key theme here, but we're going to teach about honoring the sport, honoring yourself. And that seems like a really, really huge piece in driving your philosophy.
Yeah. And it's the entree to learning more, that honor and that is exhibited by being a humble, curious, open learner. There's always something more to learn. You can never get bored. If you're really interested in the sport, in awe of it, you're just kind of in wonder at how complex and infinite the things are to learn. It keeps you kind of connected with that childlike curiosity, which is what enables you to become better as you learn. You have no ego in, I have to pretend that I know everything about the kick serve. Well, you don't. Nobody does. That's why the very best in the world continue to tinker all the time. And so, the attitude that I try and teach our players is a true master never says that they master something. A real expert doesn't call themselves a master. A real expert is always learning more because they know no matter how much they learn, there's something more to learn. So that's the kind of curiosity and humility that drives the learning, which then allows you to become a better competitor. So the irony, the zen of it, of course, is that the less you're focused on your performance and the more you're focused on your learning and the love of the game, the more likely you are to get better and perform better.
Oh, that's great, Peter. And we often talk about in player development, the process leads to the outcome and never the other way. And you're talking about it from an honor and learning. I coming from a psychology originally, and a lot of my training was in psych as well. Many times people feel that being competitive is at odds with being honorable. For some of the things that you're talking about in this podcast, how have you sort of married the two concepts that they can coexist, that we can be honorable and we can be very competitive?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it gets back to, what are you trying to do on the tennis court? Okay. Yes, you're trying to win, but what are you trying to do? You're trying to play good tennis, right? What is good tennis? Good tennis, a good tennis point is one where each player is playing to the best of his or her abilities at that moment. And it's not easy for either of you. It's exciting. It's engaging. It's enthralling, right? Why do we like the longer points where the crowd goes, ooh, oh, wow, and they can't believe the gets that these people are making. And it's just exhilarating. Well, when we play those kinds of points ourselves in a very reduced, shorter, not as elegant version of what the pros are doing, that's the same rush that we get as when we're watching it in the crowd. So when you're competing and your opponent is, you need each other. You need each other to produce that kind of a point. You need each other to play your best in order to play good tennis, exciting tennis, memorable tennis. I often ask my players, look, getting an ace is fun. Okay. Everybody likes doing that. But what's more fun? Winning a match 6-0, 6-0 that the guy couldn't even compete with you, or winning a close match, or even losing a close match where you felt, I played my hardest. I never gave up. I was in it. I gave my best, and she was just a little bit better than me today. Wow, great match. What would you rather be playing? So, 0-0, yeah, we'd all like to have one or two of those in our history, but that gets boring really quickly if you don't have a contest. That's why we call it a contest, right? So you can compete and be honorable at the same time.
That's why JP doesn't play me. He's never stepped on the court to hit balls with me because he doesn't want to be dishonorable and show me up. So, I love this, Peter, and you can really feel that you own this philosophy. It's part of who you are, and that you exude it, the excitement for the game, the love of the game. And I think, as we think about our listeners, and a lot of those listeners are young coaches who are exploring their philosophy and thinking about how they want to communicate the game to the players that they work with. But I think you're providing such a great sort of role model for thinking about, hey, there's more to this than the technique. There's more than this to the tactics. There's a way of going about it, which we can all be proud of. And no matter what happens, win or lose, play bad, play poorly, you can walk off the court having respected the game and respected yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And, there's a difference, obviously, between coaching a team of players and being a pro doing an individual lesson, and having that kind of a relationship. But I keep coming back to it, you're building a relationship with this person, these people that, in the best circumstances lasts beyond your coaching relationship. And, you're continuing to touch bases in later life. They feel like you've made an impact on them, with them, for off the court life and not just on the court life. So if you're thinking broadly about how's the relationship going, and what am I doing to help this individual feel better about herself, feel more in control of some things in her life, feel like he's competent, and feel like he's loved no matter what. That's one of the most important things. I had a doubles team on the girls' season a couple of seasons ago, and my number one team was getting beat up pretty badly. And we play, mostly we play pro sets to 8, no ad. So it goes pretty quickly. The match is just that set. And they were down a couple of breaks and on the brink. And I had called them over to the fence earlier in the match, and we talked, and they promptly went out and lost the next 3 games. So I had a little hesitancy about whether Coach Pete was going to be much help. But, they're on the brink of losing. I thought, okay, let's all, I'm modeling never give up. So let's have a conversation. Only this time I brought them over to the fence, and we didn't talk about strategy or anything. I just said, you guys know this, But I just want to remind you that what I think of you has nothing to do with the outcome of this match. I love you whether you win or lose this match. That's it. And one of them just kind of turned to her partner and said, Coach Pete said he loves us. And you could see the tension and the worry and the pressure just kind of drain right out of them. You know, they laughed, they jogged back onto the court. They were animated and energized in a way that they hadn't been. They played some great tennis, almost pulled it out. I mean, there's no fairy tale ending. They lost 6-8, but they won like 5 or 6 of the last 6 or 7 games in that match. And I was just so proud of them. And at our season-ending banquet, I highlighted that as one of the best matches we had all season because they turned it around. They turned it around from something so simple. Just, you know, he loves us no matter what. The winning and losing is not what matters. The trying is what matters. You know, that's it.
Well, that's tremendous, Peter, because it just really shows them where truly your heart is and what matters most, and that helps them remove a lot of worries about the outcome and just compete, like you say. So that's tremendous. But I think, JP, we're probably going to run up against it here, and
let's pause there, because I think what I'd love to start with next time, Peter, and this is absolutely brilliant information. I love the philosophy and the way you go about it. I'd love to start off with then diving into your 2 non-negotiables with the love the game more, obviously how you perform, and love yourself and humility, and because that the example you just gave there kind of reflects that. All right, well, that wraps us up for this week's episode of Compete Like a Champion. We were very fortunate and grateful to get on Dr. Peter Scales. If you have not read his book, we would strongly recommend purchasing it. It is called Mental and Emotional Training for Tennis, Compete, Learn, Honor. So be sure to check that out. We put a link in the show notes that will take you to a synopsis of the book and then where you can go and purchase that. So thank you for tuning in for this week's episode. And Dr. Larry and I, we look forward to speaking with you next week.